That's the problem with education. We're telling you this is what you need to learn. How the heck do you know what I need to learn? Because we're the school. Where's my internet training? That's what's going to make me successful. How do I leverage social media? How do I build a relationship? How do I close deals?
Welcome back to Personalization Outbreak Podcast. Our guest today is Brad Lea. Brad built LightSpeed VT into a multi-million-dollar global tech company from scratch. As its founder and CEO, Brad's vision has led to LightSpeed VT becoming the world's leading interactive training system. Brad also hosts one of the top business podcasts, Dropping Bombs, and is the author of The Real Deal. Brad, welcome to the show, man. Great to have you.
Thank you guys for having me. I'm honored and blessed to be on such a prestigious podcast.
Well, first of all, Brad, you know that you and I go a long way, and I'm proud of you, and I'm glad that we're finally able to do this together. I know I've been in a couple of your Dropping Bombs podcasts, and it's legendary for all of you who haven't had a chance to experience it. But Brad, before we jump into the topic today around what you think your views are on the future of learning and the role that online training will play, tell us a little bit about LightSpeed. I'd like our audience to get to know who LightSpeed is and why is it that it's now the world's leading interactive training system?
You know, 20 years ago, I felt what it was like to help somebody learn something that made a massive impact in their life. And so I went out on the road to do it for more people. And when I was out on the road, I realized that training isn't really what people think it is. Right now, I think people confuse exposure with training. So I did, and so I fixed it with this technology, and over the last 20 years, we keep evolving it to where effectively we help two types of people, companies and organizations that want to train their people better, and then subject matter expertise like yourself or anybody that has a real valuable knowledge or skill set that can be taught in any way, that it can be taught over the internet and or with some blended live solutions, then we help those guys bring it to market. So really, LightSpeed's a web-based technology that is the tool that LightSpeed, the company, uses to help you train people better and monetize content. The platform and the technology that we created is just the tool. The company, because it's confusing, is the people or are the people that know what happened over the last 20 years and how to implement and roll out said programs within organizations and how to structure it, et cetera. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense. So we're going to come back to it in just a moment. So Brad, let's get to know you as an individual for a moment.
All right.
So part of the unique way that I've experienced you think, the way you think, is that you're all about fierce simplicity. Yeah. Why do we need to focus more on being more simple? Because that's what you're about.
Yeah. Well, I just think it's key to be clear on where you're going, what you're doing, because it'll make it easier to get there. So I could say in 10 words what I could have said in 4, and I just believe the 4 would have been better for simplicity reasons to help people grasp what it is you're talking about quicker. Well, we want to get where we're going, right? So yep. Listen, we could confuse each other by using $10 words and creating all of these stories about a story to get to a question that you asked that I'm not even answering with my story, but we could get rid of all that and just cut to the chase and just get direct. Well, if I'm going from A to B, if I can exclude all that noise and just get, bam, what's the answer? I'm going to get where I'm going quicker.
So why is it that you think that most people don't have common sense?
Well, I think they do. They just don't use it. I think we all have common sense. We're just not using it. Why? I think we're indoctrinated in schools, and I think we're taught incorrectly. So I tell people to create a different perspective and just question things. And when you question things, believe it or not, other things seem a little more obvious. And that's common sense.
So how do we get people to have a greater sense of clarity? Because I know that ultimately it's clarity that you solve for people. And that's why you built LightSpeed VT. And that's why you enjoy teaching those that perhaps haven't been taught the life lessons that you've learned along the way.
I just believe pure information is better than diluted, bloated information.
So Brad, you're the focus igniter. How do we help people stay focused at a time of so much uncertainty?
Raise the value of what they're focusing on. is what I would say. If you're not focused on something, it's because you don't value it very much. Your priorities are not whatever that is. So you have to attach it to a bigger goal or priority or vision for yourself. If you're not focusing on it, it's only because it's not important enough.
So talking about importance, shouldn't we have a greater focus right now on what the future of learning? And I think you're the perfect person to talk about this, given not only what you've experienced over the last 20 years, but also where you see the future of online learning. So give us a sense of what is the future of learning, Brad?
Well, I think
where's it headed?
Learning and online learning are not necessarily different things. At the end of the day, one's a modality. One is how did I do it? Just happened to be online. Learning is learning, and I think in the future, learning is going to be heavily dependent on a customized pathway, meaning right now we cause the students, the consumers, to adapt to the content, especially in our education system. And I think in the future, the content will adapt to the individual.
Scott, jump in. What are you thinking?
What Brad is saying is right in line with what a lot of the innovators are trying to do in terms of all the three sectors that we often talk about, right? Whether it's healthcare, business, or higher ed. And really the exciting thing for me is it started in the very beginning with the exposure is not training, right? Just the exposure to something, just putting something in front of a book or a screen or an idea doesn't mean that they're getting it, doesn't mean that they engage it, doesn't mean that they actually can use it or deploy it in a meaningful way. And for me, what's exciting about the future of the educational side of this is frankly that there's momentum towards essentially getting rid of, you talked about simplicity versus clarity. I think when you said simplicity, Brad, I think that clarity is what you were talking about. Not everything is simple, but the clarity we can do, right? What are we trying to do when we're training somebody or when we're teaching somebody? What is the purpose? What is the tool? Where are we going? Ultimately, the idea of information exchange as education has long been gone. And that's one thing I appreciate about Brad's approach, right, is that he's not trying to revamp how do we deliver information. As a matter of fact, he's trying to disrupt the system to the point where we're realizing that information's already out there. And what we need to do is to help create tools and modes for people to ask questions, to then go find this information, to think about this information, to then produce more. So anyway, I really appreciate Brad's approach with this idea of the, as we call it in higher ed, the sage on a stage phase of things is gone. But that's the same thing for corporate leadership. It's the same thing for healthcare. It's no longer about somebody getting up and saying, this is how it is. And the more that we do education, healthcare outside of that frame, and more of thinking of what we're doing is both content and tools and finding a better way to build that, we're going to be better teachers because we're going to be teaching people about questions and about how they can find their own questions, articulate their own questions, and then what sort of resources and tools are out there to pursue those answers. Anyway, I ramble a bit, but I am excited about the confluence here.
So, Brad, how did you react to what Scott's talking about here?
He basically agreed with me, and so I must agree with him. I concur. In my mind, the only thing he said that I didn't agree with was he said the idea. It's not an idea. LightSpeed was an idea 21 years ago. Now, it's a practice, and it's a common practice. I can help companies and organizations develop a world-class training and communication platform, which, by the way, training without communications, again, those two go together if you really want the end result. So right now, we want to cover our butts. We want to check a mark and say they've been trained when we know they haven't. Doesn't matter. You're paying me to march them through the room, which most businesses do. Most businesses don't really actually want to train their people. They want to be able to prove they train their people, which is ironic because unless you're testing every single one of them and you're really measuring comprehension, you're never going to know if they actually got it, even if just by simple test at the end of the semester or class or whatever. Why? Well, because that's called memory recall. That's not called absorption of information. The knowledge transfer has happened, right? Repetition. Here's 4 things that you have to have. You have to have good content, right? Because if you train them effectively to do it wrong, they'll do it wrong. So you have to get your hands on good content to begin with, the right way to do it. Okay, whether that's an opinion or not, that's subjective. It doesn't matter. Somebody makes the opinion of what good content looks like, and then we deliver it with repetition, practice, and accountability. Businesses don't want to hold their people accountable. I've trained businesses where prior to me, their idea of training was marching someone into a room, talking to them for an hour, and then letting them go. The problem with that is they didn't test everybody. They didn't know who really heard anything. So all we did is we just took the technology we developed for my training and we started showing it to other people, like the subject matter experts. So now we have a lot of different subject matter experts using the platform to deliver that expertise, but we still do the same thing. Now we deliver good content with repetition, practice, and then accountability. Like a lot of times managers, they don't even know what that level of employee went through, and you manage them. Like, how am I supposed to manage a group of employees across the United States, no less, and I don't even know what it is they're supposed to be doing? Why? Well, because I wasn't in the training. That's their training. I have my own training. I have leadership training. I have management training. I'm not real sure what they were trained. Well, how's that possible? So if the companies in question, especially larger organizations, understood that if they just delivered good content with repetition, practice, which most of them miss, and accountability, and they point that force, that's a saber, they point that force at any area of business, they will see an improvement. Ironically, with the highest ROI they can make. Like they won't realize a better ROI than training effectively. What most people are doing is they're spending a bunch of money training ineffectively. They're getting a diluted result, if any, flash in the pan type solutions, and they believe, because that's traditional, that's the way it's been, that's the way we do it. Our educational system is teaching our kids things that don't matter anymore. And nobody stopped and said, hey, we need to update this curriculum. Nobody really cares if George Washington has wooden teeth. I've never used it before. Why did I have to go to calculus? In case calculus season hit me and you wanted me prepared for that in the real world? No, where's how to build a relationship, how to manage your credit, how important credit is? Where's the classes in school? And I'm not talking higher education, even though I'd question that too. Where's all of this in schools? It's not there. And then when you get to higher education, you're listening to someone who listened to someone who listened to someone. You're not listening to the people who did it. The people who did it don't even agree half the time with the people who are in there preaching about it. So guess what? Nowadays, with the internet and the connectivity we have as a human being, as a human race, we can plug into the dude who did it. What would you rather learn from? A professor that read about it? Or would you rather learn from the guy who built the 10-figure company?
The problem is it's a guy that built the 10-figure company. We don't get to talk. We're always...
Now you can.
Everything we do is talking to a person that talked to a person that talked to a person. That's humankind. I hear what you're saying, but I'm nervous about good content. First of all, I'm nervous about how we discern good versus bad content. What is the rubric? And then second, the other thing I'm worried about is we're leaving out the idea and the challenge of how do we actually generate and create good content, because content, like humans, evolves.
You have several questions, and I can only answer one at a time because based on how we decided to handle that would determine the rest of the answers and the solutions that would come up. But your first question, how do we determine what's good content? Well, number one, who's we? Okay, what's good to me is not going to be good to you and vice versa. You give the individual the ability to discern what their own good content looks like. That's the problem with education. We're telling you this is what you need to learn. How the heck do you know what I need to learn? Because we're the school. Okay, and you've been teaching this crap for 100 years. Guess what? Where's my internet training? That's what's going to make me successful. How do I leverage social media? How do I build a relationship? How do I close deals? How do I negotiate? How do I borrow money? Am I financial literate? Do I understand anything about money? Because when I graduated, we didn't. And guess what? I go look. It's still the same.
There's so much to talk about there. But I don't want to derail the conversation, but where would you like us to go with this? Because hold on, I got to answer him because I love Scott, dude.
Listen, I love talking to really intelligent people that have something to say. So this is rare for me. Usually I'm talking to a camera and I don't know who's actually listening to me.
Dude, I'm no more intelligent than any of us on this call or anybody that's even maybe watching later on, man. Like,
agreed.
This is equal stuff. My real concern, brother, man, is that I hear where you're going. And when it comes to caricaturizations and caricatures of reality, I think what you're saying works, and it is simple and it is easy to communicate. That said, I don't know that it really captures the true dynamics of what's going on in both education and in corporate worlds, but we could also include healthcare as well. I think it's basically looking at only the first layer of depth here. And I'm cool with that because we do need efficiency of communication. But one thing that efficiency of communication allows is for a lot of lies and bad content to essentially squeak through unchallenged. And in school, the way that I and everyone around me that I know teaches, the last thing we want to do is teach the answer. What we want to teach is how do you ask questions? How do you find answers? And the very last thing I ever ask anybody to do is tell me the right answer. So this goes back to my question about the challenge that you actually are working on. That's fantastic in terms of taking it to a whole different area with what you're doing with LightSpeed. And that is, how do we do this? How do we express these ideas that are complicated in a clear way? And how do we also make sure that we're not gatekeeping good and bad knowledge prior to the training starting? It's tough, man.
I think sometimes we bite off more than we need to. Like a lot of these questions, how do we make it? There's going to be a myriad of alternatives. I can take out my iPhone and make good content. This right here is good content. There's content being generated every day in your lifetime. Like literally, if I followed you around with a camera, there's things to learn that when you speak with your wife or your kids or your employers. Good content's generated everywhere. The question is, who determines whether it's good or bad? Well, again, you're never going to get everyone to agree on what's good and what's bad. So why try? Let them decide. We're not here to determine what you should be listening to. I don't think. I like freedom, but at the end of the day, if we had a technology, which I do, that can ask questions and interactively change the direction of the education and or the module, if you will. Because we just create interactive videos. So literally, if I put you in a studio for 2 weeks, I could almost emulate a real live encounter with Scott Lacey speaking about, for example, anthropology.
That's one of the most frightening thoughts I've ever heard of that got me excited.
Now, hold on real quick, Glenn, because then I could also go over to a politician and give them to have a virtual town hall where you see their position on all the various things with the same tool. It's just interactive video. And then I could also have a kid pick from a purple dinosaur whether they're interested in math or science or art or crafts or something else. Like, why are we telling the kid, hey, you've got to learn this? Let the kid flourish in where the kid goes, I think. Again, that's just me. But again, that's what I mean by we're never going to agree. That's just me. I'm not necessarily the right one, but that's my opinion. And if I had a system that I could give my kid a password and realize that by the time they get through this curriculum, they're going to be brighter, happier, less depressed, more educated, more able to succeed in the world by themselves, more able to contribute to society, all of the other things. Like, again, that's still an opinion of what I believe it should produce, but you'd have your own. But that's the thing. What if we could customize our own? Where I take yours and I take Glenn's and I agree, and guess what I do? I make Brad's, which is a combination of Scott and Glenn's. Now again, there's companies out there. There's companies out there paying huge dollars for these consultants to come in and tell them how they should be doing it. But the consultants come in, make a bunch of assumptions, read their analytics, and then make a suggestion. That's all they're doing. And then the question is whether the business agrees with it and wants to implement it, which for that kind of money they usually do. The question is, now how do we transfer this knowledge to the freaking 50,000 people in 600 different areas? You better do it with repetition, practice, and accountability. Because if you do it any other way, it's a nightmare.
Okay, so Brad, let's shift gears a little bit.
Come on.
Let's shift gears.
All right.
So what do you tell an organization without repeating what you said? Everyone seems to be challenged by finding the right online platform. Keep it simple for us. In a minute or less, what are the required tools to deploy a successful online learning platform? Because it seems like they can learn a lot from you.
Okay. Number one, most learning platforms or learning management systems that you're referring to, they allow you to host content. You want one that'll help you create content, that has tools to create content. Okay? You want one that has interactivity so it can adapt to the individual. It's not one size fits all cookie cutter. It can adapt to your business model. It can adapt to your hierarchy. You can create different content roles. So it's basically granular to create a custom experience, if you will, which will just increase engagement, overall adoption. Okay,
hold on a second. So number one is it can create content. Number two, it can adapt to the individual. What's three?
3 is that it's ultimately, I would say, engaging. Leaderboards, community, Q&A. It's a hub, it's a portal, it's a culture. It's a culture of learning that you implement from the get-go. And you implement it by issuing a password to such technology that does have interactivity, it does have good content, it will provide the repetition and the practice and the role-playing and the accountability for whomever to make sure that information is delivered, and not only delivered, but how about implemented? Because just because you know it doesn't mean you're going to go do it on the job or do it at the hospital. So in some cases, it's going to be a little bit more critical. We're going to, in those cases, maybe take your picture every 5 seconds and store it with the training session. Why? Because I need to make sure you didn't look at a book. I can lock your computer. I can let a proctor come in and watch you and have online proctoring. So there's a lot of solutions that can be implemented into our technology, but it's really just a tool like an iPhone. What do you use this for, Glenn? You say, I use that to let a net know I'm going to be 20 minutes late. What do you use it for, Scott? I use it to have the Uber come get me. Those are two different things, same tool. That's LightSpeed. LightSpeed is an interactive training and communication platform. You're asking about the learning platforms that are out there. The main difference is they host content, and ours is designed to get you to learn it. Deliver, track, and measure that content. Theirs is designed to give you a spot to hold it all.
Okay, so here's another question that I keep hearing that I'm not sold on.
Okay.
That as we try to individualize content in learning for the individual, that AI is the end-all be-all solution. What's your reaction to that?
Oh, AI's coming, kids, as we all know. And I believe that this is going to be a game changer, because instead of somebody having to figure out this interactive path that has to be created with my technology, by the way, the thinking about it is more important than the tool. If I dump all the tools to build a house at your house and come back in 6 months, will there be a house or a mess? Because if you did it to me, dude, there's going to be a mess 6 months after you drop off all the tools and supplies to build a house, because I don't know how to build a house. Okay. Now, could I get it built? Sure. I could call a general contractor. I could get the job done, but you don't want to do it yourself. And too many companies out there, they buy these LMSs that are do-it-yourself models. Then they don't get any adoption. It's not really training people anyway. In most cases, it's flat out obnoxious. And the employee base is making fun of the executives and the management teams because they don't even know what each other's doing half the time. They're committees and this, and there's nobody listening and or adapting anything. That's, I believe, the age of personalization, which you might know something about. No?
You bet I do.
So again, if a company approached me and said, listen, Brad, we'll pay you any fee you want just to build us a world-class training system, not just videos. Okay, I watch mixed martial arts. Doesn't make me a black belt. I've watched anthropology shows. I'm not an anthropologist, okay? Watching it doesn't necessarily train you. That exposes you to information. And again, I don't know where you guys are at in California. Nevada, you could get arrested for exposure. In Alaska, exposure can kill you. And here we are doing it to our employees and our customers. Like when you onboard a new customer to your brand and you basically just expose them and puke a bunch of information at them, and then you're wondering why they don't love your product like you thought they would. They don't even know your product like you thought they do. Okay, so how do we get that accountability? It's easy, real-time tracking. So now instead of sending Glenn a brochure, I send Glenn a password. I see if he logged in, which is the equivalent of opening it. I see if he understands it, which is the equivalent of reading it. I get real-time data, which allows massive. Now, again, you apply that to education. You apply that to healthcare. You apply that to the military. Okay, it's going to be a completely different result, different objective, but at the end of the day, it's the same tool. The ability to create interactive content, deliver, track, and measure it, and then create deep analytic reporting metrics built behind it, underneath the hood, triggers, notifications, things that are happening. It's like having a real-time, full-time trainer in person. Now, when you apply that AI you're talking about, again, the problem with AI is garbage in, garbage out. You know what's more powerful than AI, I believe? Authentic intelligence, which means whoever thought up AI is smarter than AI. Now, the fear is that it won't remain that way because the AI are talking, and they just shut down a couple of AI robots because they were speaking their own language. Did you guys read about that? These two separate entity robots, AI-based robots, started their own conversation and they started communicating completely in a new language that the developers didn't understand, so they just shut them down. So like AI gets really intelligent quickly. So I see it coming, and I see it being a big advantage in the future. I'm eager to say, listen, Glenn, you log in with this password and you'll go through a series of conversation. And by the time you're done, dude, you'll be the most satisfied customer in the world. Why? Because that AI is going to go out and research every possible piece of content offering in milliseconds and spit up to you the best possible match for you. By the way, like sometimes, believe it or not, there's going to be people that would listen and learn from Scott Lacey far better than I. And then there's people that would listen to both of us and they would learn and listen to me better than Scott. Why? Maybe the way I say it. Maybe that simplicity. Maybe because I'm wearing a golden night shirt and they can relate. I don't know, but I guarantee you, learning is an individual thing. It's not a one-size-fits-all thing. And when you train and develop people, it's the same thing. Why? Because you're dealing with people.
Scott, why don't you give us some closing comments and a final question for Brad?
Yeah, I think in terms of the conversation, the reassuring part, at least for me, and I hope for Brad and others on the call, is that I think where we're in agreement is where we go back to a point that Brad made earlier when he's saying, like, how do I engage somebody that's not engaged? How do I pull them in? And he didn't talk about the platform at that point. He talked at the meta level. He said, I raised the level of engagement. He said, I raised their ability to engage. So if talking about making this pen doesn't really get them going, let's talk about something else. Maybe let's talk about the importance of a pen for writing. Oh, they're like writing. So let's get them in on this pen stuff by talking about writing, by raising the level. And I think that's one area for sure where Brad and I are 100% in alignment. And that's ultimately, I think, what's going to guide these conversations. To close that, what I am going to say is that we have been flying fast and furious with a lot of very quick, and it's because we only have the time to. But like with AI, like to talk about AI as if it's a singular thing, to find clarity by oversimplifying it, we miss out on both opportunities and dangers. So here's where I think we connect in a great way to move forward. And that is, what I'm understanding is that Brad has really got some great concepts, ideas, and is out there deploying them and discovering more in terms of the platform that people need to engage and create community for learning, regardless of where that comes from. I love that, and I think that's important. But we need to engage with each other by going to what Brad says, that higher level. And that higher level is our deliverable. And Brad, the thing that makes me with you on this 100% is that you said, I could get rid of all this other assessment crap. What I want to know is this, for example, in education, is this kid happier? Is this kid better adapted to make a fulfilling life and to engage with people? Is this person able to create knowledge? Is this person able to make questions? And so ultimately, the platformers and the content producers, they're both deliverers. And the more that we engage with that higher level meta purpose, the more we're going to find synergy. And the one warning I have is that we will not ever find that synergy if we spend too much time at the lower levels, which is how do you make the trinkets and what trinkets are best. That's where I'll put it out. And Brad, I'd love to hear your thoughts about that. Did I find a Venn diagram for us?
I would say, yeah, that was outstanding. Like I said in the beginning, love talking to smart people.
You're one of them, man. I'm going to pass it back to you, Glenn.
Thank you.
I'm just going to close by saying that was a reflection of what it feels like when you can balance the age of standardization with the age of personalization. In other words, what he basically said is we need both the platform and the content, but it's really about the individual that's driving new standards for success, and that there is no hierarchy, there's responsibility, and that there's love, and that there's a deeper sense of intimacy that we're all responsible for if we're going to push humanity and education and wisdom forward to make the world a better place. Brad, you're always an experience, my dear friend.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for everything.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. Nice to meet you, Scott.
Great to meet you, Brad.
And as we always close the show, when you lead in the age of personalization, you will see things that others don't. Do what others won't, and keep pushing when prudence says quit. Thank you, Brad.
Thanks, buddy.